All right, Deuteronomy 8. Let's call this one good in the end because it took me a couple of tries reading through it, but it reminded me of this passage in Job that says, I will come forth as gold. And it is Job after he has already gone through it, and his friends have tried to comfort him, but they basically made it worse. He is kind of stuck trying to figure out what's going on. And even though he's at a loss for a why, he still trusts that he will, through all of it, come forth as gold. Now, Job was a righteous man, but the one thing that we all have in common, righteous, unrighteous, everybody in between, is much like the children of Israel here. There are times when God is going to let us hunger, and it's not just for food, because he's going to say here, he's going to let them hunger for food. We can hunger for all kinds of things that we lack in life. We all got something that's missing because this place is imperfect. And God uses those things to bring us forth as gold if we let him. And so when we see the children of Israel, we might not be able to identify with the Job, but I think we can all identify with imperfect people. And to this point, watching Moses go back through the history of all the things that they did in the wilderness, we can pretty much say they're imperfect people who God is still promising to do good in the end if they will be complete. As we talked about in previous chapters, you don't ever want to water down good advice, because good advice at full strength can do you a lot of good. Likewise, if you have a chance to see clearly, you don't want to opt into a dim room if you can go into a well-lit room so you can, one, see your environment and clearly see what's around you, and two, you can be self-aware. To the degree there's a mirror in a well-lit room, you can see yourself clearly. To the degree there's a mirror in a dimly lit room, you won't see either the environment or yourself very clearly. And so he's going to remind them that you need to not only be mindful of the whole commandment or counsel of God, because he's described as wonderful counselor, at least the Christ is. You also need to remember the whole way, meaning with their history, there are a lot of lessons, as we've said, they've learned along the way. They don't want to miss those lessons. They don't want to go back over those mistakes. And so moving forward, they do well to recall both the law and the process of refining so that they can shorten the amount of time that they have to spend in the fire or in hunger and prolong the amount of time that they have in joy. So more importantly, a very famous passage of scripture comes out of this chapter where Jesus, when he is in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, much like we've seen Moses, at the end of his stint, though, Satan is going to pay him a visit and tempt him. And in one of those temptations, he's going to respond to Satan by saying, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. That comes from this chapter. So likewise here, when it says that God let them hunger, understand that when Jesus rejected the temptation to eat, he knew that God perfects his people by letting them hunger. And in suffering with us, once again, it qualified him to help guide us out of these difficulties that we face on this side. And so when we're looking at this counsel from God, when he says you need to follow the whole counsel of God, it's because you have advice coming from somebody who has suffered in the same ways that we have. And so in Jesus, the word is describing somebody who has been through it and is competent to help us understand how to minimize our time in the unpleasant parts of the process so that we can spend more time appreciating life having come forth as gold. That's why we say his best to you as you go forward in him.